Hi there, I'm Romy. I paid for my sister's $850 graduation party, only to be told by security that I didn't belong there. That moment, it wasn't just a slap in the face. It was the final crack in a wall they'd been building for years. Behind my back, they used my money, erased my name, and rewrote the truth to make me the outsider in my own family. But what hurt more than being left out was realizing I'd been used in silence, over and over again. And the worst part? That party was just the beginning. I told myself I wasn't expecting anything. I had no illusions. I wasn't hoping for hugs or smiles or even a seat at the table. I just wanted to see my sister walk across that stage, the one she'd been talking about for 4 years straight. The same sister whose rent and tuition I'd been covering while skipping dinners myself. But I still put on my best clean white blouse, jeans without holes, pulled my hair into something presentable. Maybe, just maybe, someone would look me in the eye today. The sun had already dipped lower by the time I pulled up to the estate in Bloomington. It was one of those big houses with manicured hedges and a fountain out front. Real, look how well we're doing energy. Cars lined both sides of the street. My dad's old pickup was crooked near the driveway. Kaylee's Jeep gleamed like it had been detailed that morning. I didn't see Grandma and Grandpa's Civic. That was strange. They never missed family milestones, not even awkward ones. I walked up with my phone in hand, the screenshot of the invite page open. I hadn't been sent anything directly, of course. Just saw the event mentioned in a comment thread on my mom's Facebook. That's how I hear about most things family-related, by accident. 2 security guards stood at the gate. One tall and thin, the other built like a fridge. Neither smiled. "This is a private celebration," the bigger one said. I kept my voice even. "I'm her sister." He raised an eyebrow. "Name?" "Romy." The other guard tapped his earpiece and stepped away, speaking low into his mic. I stood there, arms at my sides, hearing music and laughter floating from the backyard, glasses clinking. Someone shouted, "To the future!" and people cheered. Then the door opened. Out walked Kaylee. Glittery gold dress, phone in hand, like it was surgically attached. Behind her were my parents. My mom wore one of her pastel cardigans she saves for important days. My dad looked like he hadn't aged a day since the last time I saw him, which somehow made me angrier. Kaylee didn't even pause. She glanced at me, turned to the guards, and said it plain as day. "She doesn't belong here." I actually chuckled, thought it was sarcasm, until my dad said, "You really showed up?" He didn't sound surprised, more like amused, like I'd just walked into the wrong movie theater by mistake. "I didn't say a word," I replied. "I just walked away." My mom tried to jump in, voice all hushed and urgent like we were backstage at a funeral. "Romy, this is Kaylee's day. Let's not make it into something it's not." I looked her straight in the eye. "You mean like pretending I don't exist?" My dad laughed, actually laughed. "Come on, Romy. You know how things are. We just didn't think you'd want to come after the stuff you've been saying." "I haven't said anything," I said, calm but clear. Then Kaylee chimed in. "You only help to hold it over me. It's manipulative." I could have argued. I could have reminded them that I'd been transferring $750 every single month, right on the dot, and $3,200 each semester, without a single complaint. That I hadn't missed a payment in 3 years. But instead I said, "Then you're welcome." I turned and walked back to my car. There was no storming off, no tears, just me, the crunch of gravel beneath my flats, and a kind of silence that felt more final than anything we'd ever screamed at each other growing up. I sat in the driver's seat for a minute. No music, no calls. I typed one line into my phone. "Starting next month, your rent's on you. Good luck." I hit send, started the engine, left the estate behind like a chapter I was done rereading. The road home was familiar, same turns, same intersections, but everything felt sharper. I noticed the cracks in the asphalt, the flickering streetlight near Central Ave. Even the gas station I usually ignored seemed to glow differently. By the time I got home, it was after 9. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door and kicked off my shoes. Didn't bother turning on the lights. Just laid back on the couch, one arm flung over my eyes. Then my phone buzzed. Blocked caller. I let it ring. It buzzed again 5 minutes later. Same number. I ignored it. I should have turned it off completely, but something in me wanted to know who couldn't leave it alone. The third time it rang, I stared at the screen. Didn't answer. The night outside was still. Not silent, but still. I could hear the faint hum of someone's TV next door. A car door in the distance. I closed my eyes and saw Kaylee's face. The way she looked past me like I was some delivery person who wandered into the photo booth. The kind of indifference that doesn't happen by accident. They didn't forget me. They chose to erase me. And maybe this time, I was finally choosing not to disappear quietly. Sleep never really came. I drifted in and out, the kind of restless haze that leaves you more tired than before. At some point near dawn, I finally got up, reheated day-old coffee, and stood by the window watching the streetlights blink out one by one. The city always looks more honest in the morning. Less makeup, more cracks. I checked my phone again. Nothing new from Kaylee. Not even a fake apology. That silence took me back to January. My birthday had landed on a Tuesday that year, buried under a blizzard that shut half the city down. I didn't expect a party. I didn't even expect cake. But I figured maybe I'd get a call, or one of those dry, emoji-laced texts my mom sends when she's trying to seem warm. Instead, I got a Facebook notification. Kaylee had gone out that night. Champagne flutes, sparklers on a dessert plate, group photos in a downtown bar. She'd tagged everyone, friends, coworkers, even someone named Ty I'd never heard of. She posted it with the caption, "Surprise night out, grateful for the ones who matter." That was the same night I had leftover carrot cake from a nurse I barely talked to. She'd stuck a single candle in it and said, "Don't tell HR we lit something in the break room." I'd laughed, because what else do you do? The next day my mom texted, "Hope you're doing okay." That was it. No happy birthday. No explanation. Just a vague check-in, like she was trying to cover her bases without committing to the facts. I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, I checked my bank account. Not out of paranoia. Habit. Years of tight budgeting made it second nature. There was a new tab labeled Shared Access. Judith's name sat there in bold. She could see every transaction, every bag of frozen peas, every overdue Netflix charge. And it clicked. Months ago, Kaylee had asked me to start sending rent to Mom's account because it's easier for her to track. I hadn't questioned it. Of course I hadn't. That's what they count on. But Judith hadn't said a word since. Not a thank you, not a check-in, just silence, while my bank became her private microscope. I stared at that screen for longer than I should have. I wasn't angry, not yet, just hollow. That started to change 2 weeks before the graduation party. Kaylee had texted me out of nowhere. No greeting, no, how have you been? Just, I need a dress, graduation is coming. Budget? I told her $200. That was already more than I could afford, but I figured if she kept it reasonable, I'd manage. She replied with a screenshot. A dress. Not just any dress. A sleeveless, floor-length gold designer piece with a retail tag of $698 plus tax. She wrote under it, "This one. You wouldn't get it, but this level of attention demands something polished." I stared at those words for so long I missed my bus to work. I still bought the dress. I didn't argue. I didn't negotiate. I just transferred the amount and told her to confirm the delivery address. She sent a thumbs up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling again, the same crack in the corner, shaped like a crooked Y. I pulled up Kaylee's Instagram. The dress had already made its debut. Full-length mirror selfie, captioned, "Deserve every bit of this moment." #grateful life comments rolled in. "You're glowing." "Queen vibes." "So proud of you." She liked every single one. My name, not mentioned. I checked the messages again. Nothing, not even a thanks. I closed the app. My phone screen reflected my face, pale and tired under the low kitchen light. They always said I was the serious one, the stable one, the one who keeps things together. I used to think that was praise. Now it just sounded like a warning. Don't expect much. Be useful, not visible. The silence had weight, the kind that stretches back years and presses into your chest when you least expect it. I stood there for a while, holding the edge of the counter, grounding myself, trying not to let it pull me under again. Some people burn bridges. Others just pretend the river never existed. And me? I was starting to realize I'd built the bridge alone. A few days passed, but the heaviness stayed. I moved through my routines like a ghost. Work, laundry, dishes, bills, each task as dull and repetitive as the next. I wasn't numb, not exactly. Just waiting, like I was circling a bruise that hadn't fully formed yet. It was a Thursday night around 9 when the message came through. I'd just pulled the last load of towels from the dryer, and the buzz of my phone startled me more than it should have. I wiped my hands on my sweatpants and glanced at the screen. Marlene. We hadn't spoken directly in almost a year. She was my cousin, younger by a few years, quiet at family gatherings, always smiling politely, but never saying much. I liked her, but we weren't close. Her text read, "Hey, can I send you something privately? I think you need to see this." I stood there for a moment, staring at the screen, then typed back, "Sure." Less than a minute later, 3 images came through. Screenshots. I tapped the first, a group chat. Username, Kaylee plus real ones. I scrolled slowly. The first message was from Kaylee. Told y'all he'd show up. So desperate to be part of everything. Then another. He pays my bills and still gets treated like trash. Must love it. And another from someone else. Did he cry? Please tell me he cried. Kaylee's reply. Didn't stay long enough to find out. Too bad, I would have filmed it. I stopped breathing for a second. These weren't just careless words. They were sharpened, chosen, meant to cut. The second screenshot had even more. One of the girls in the chat, someone I didn't recognize, wrote, "Wait, you really didn't invite him? After he paid all that?" Kaylee responded, "Why should I? Paying doesn't mean you're part of the family. It means you're useful. That's it." I dropped onto the couch like my knees gave out. The screen was still glowing in my hand. I opened the third image, a meme, my face pulled from an old Facebook photo, edited with the words, "ATM machine, but make it sad." I sat there in the dark for a long while, the only sound in the room the soft hum of my space heater. Then the phone buzzed again. Another message from Marlene. I didn't know how to bring it up. I was added to that group by accident last year. I never left. Just kept watching. She never noticed I was still in it. Another beat. I'm not sending this to be mean. I just think people deserve to know who they're defending. I didn't respond right away. I didn't cry either. I thought I might. But there was no panic, no spiral. Just this overwhelming clarity, like stepping into cold air after being in a stuffy room too long. I typed back, "Thank you, seriously." She replied with a single heart. After that, I opened the family group chat, the one where they posted baby photos and links to fundraisers and bad jokes from Uncle Harold. The one where nobody had said a word to me since I left the party. I stared at the blinking cursor for a full minute. Then I typed, "Let me show you what your perfect daughter really thinks of me." I attached the screenshot of Kaylee's messages. No commentary, no explanation, just facts. Then I hit send. The chat went silent. 10 full minutes passed. I watched the timestamp updates. Who saw it, who hadn't yet. Then a single action. Aunt Martha left the group. No text, no goodbye, just gone. That was all it took for me to understand how thin that family unity had always been. One exposed truth, and the seams started to split. I sat back on the couch, my fingers still buzzing from the adrenaline. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt awake. It wasn't about being forgotten anymore. It was about being used, lied to, mocked for the very sacrifices I made in silence. The weight I'd carried for so long, it had a name now. And it wasn't mine to hold anymore. The group chat remained dead silent all the next day. Not a single reaction. No one tried to defend her. No one asked for context. They all just vanished. I didn't know if they were processing or pretending it didn't happen. But either way, I let it sit. I'd said my piece. Truth didn't need a follow-up. I was halfway through microwaving leftover curry when my phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't a cousin or a blocked number. It was Judith. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring out. She called again a few minutes later. I figured if I didn't pick up now, I'd just be dodging this for days. So I tapped accept and waited. "Rami," she started, her voice coated in that syrupy softness she used when she was trying to sound concerned, but still above it all. "I really wish you hadn't posted that. You've upset your sister deeply. I didn't answer at first. Just let the weight of that sentence hang in the air. Then I said, You mean the sister who humiliated me in front of security after I paid for her party? She was emotional, my mother replied. It was a big day. For her? Sure. For me, it was the day I learned you'd rather pretend I didn't exist than risk 1 minute of discomfort. Judith sighed like she was the one exhausted by all this. Romy, we were trying to keep things peaceful. There was no need for all this drama. Peaceful for who exactly? Look, I don't know why you're bringing up every little thing. Your sister is younger, she's figuring things out. You should be the bigger person. I almost laughed. The bigger person. How many times had that been my role? The quiet one, the helper, the stable one, the ATM, never the person anyone defended. Let me ask you something, I said calmly. When did you last wish me a happy birthday? She paused. That hesitation said more than any apology would have. That's not fair, she said finally. You never said anything either. Because I was tired of keeping score, Mom. Then why start now? She asked, a little more sharply. Because now I know it wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. I hung up before she could reply. I wasn't going to spend another minute letting her twist this. A few hours later, as I was cleaning up the living room, I heard a knock. Not rushed, not angry, just steady. When I opened the door, Grandpa Harold was standing there, holding a small pink bakery box, and a look that told me he knew more than he was letting on. Got your favorites, he said, lifting the box slightly. Lemon poppy seed. He stepped in and sat down like it was the most natural thing in the world. We weren't invited, he said quietly, before I could ask. Your grandmother and I. We didn't know about the party until after. Judith said we'd cause a scene. Apparently, we complained too much. Complain about what? I asked, even though I already knew. Music, food, grandpa stories? You know, being alive? I shook my head, the sting behind my eyes sharp. She said Grandpa always talks too much and takes attention away from Kaylee. He didn't react, just opened the bakery box and pulled out a muffin. Well, I do talk a lot, he said, shrugging, but I talk about things that matter, things your parents don't want heard. We sat for a while. No TV, no distractions, just him, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, and me, trying not to let the grief leak out. Before he left, he looked at me with the kind of clarity that only comes from age and being done with sugarcoating. You're not crazy, he said. They've made you feel like you are, like wanting to be seen is selfish, but it's not. He squeezed my shoulder. Just don't lose yourself trying to keep people like them comfortable. When he left, I made another pot of coffee, not because I needed caffeine. I just needed something warm to hold on to. I stood at the sink, watching the steam rise. My phone sat on the counter, face down. For once, I didn't care what was lighting up or buzzing. Let them spiral. Let them rewrite history in the group chat. I wasn't playing along anymore. They didn't want me. They wanted the convenience of me. And for the first time in my adult life, I was done handing that out for free. The coffee grew cold on the counter, untouched. I didn't bother reheating it. Instead, I grabbed my coat and keys, sent a one-line text, "Let's talk, neutral ground," and drove into downtown Minneapolis. I chose a cafe halfway between our neighborhoods, somewhere anonymous, somewhere I wouldn't mind never returning to. Kaylee showed up 10 minutes late, dressed in her best impression of casual elegance, expensive loungewear, a flawless blowout, and sunglasses she didn't bother taking off indoors. Really? I said, gesturing to the glasses. She slipped them down her nose and smirked. Migraine, she said, like it was a punchline only she got. We sat across from each other, the silence dragging until I spoke. I'm not here to scream. I'm not here to fix anything either. She crossed her legs, glanced at her phone. Then what? I'm here to warn you, I said. If you twist one more thing about me, if I catch you rewriting reality again, I won't stay quiet. Kaylee rolled her eyes. God, you're so dramatic. This isn't court. No, I said, but lies still have consequences. She leaned back, arms crossed. You've always had this persecution complex. I make a few posts, and suddenly I'm manipulating the narrative. Give me a break. You deleted my name, I said flatly. Everywhere, Even the thank you comment you wrote me a week before the party. Gone. She blinked once. It didn't fit the vibe. There it was, the truth casual as a shrug. And putting thanks to my mom's sacrifices on your school bio? That's not just forgetting, that's theft. She waved me off. Mom did help. She made sure the checks cleared. She made sure I paid her directly. I snapped. That's what she made sure of. Kaylee raised her hands like I was the one overreacting. Look, if it means that much to you, I'll add your name to something. But this storm you're kicking up, it's not a good look. I stood up. Neither is being a liar. She didn't follow me when I left. Didn't call out or text later. And I didn't expect her to. That evening, back in my apartment, I opened her public graduation page. School blog, student spotlight, an entire section of acknowledgments. There it was in bold. I owe everything to my mother. She sacrificed so much to help me get here. I stared at the screen long enough to memorize the curve of the font. There was no mention of the woman who gave up her own vacation fund, skipped dinners, said no to new shoes for 3 years just to keep her afloat. And then I checked Judith's Facebook, a brand new photo album, my graduate. Every picture of the party was curated to look like a Hallmark ad. Judith front and center, smiling beside Kaylee in that $700 gown. The captions were what hit hardest. She did it all herself, but I'm proud to have been her support system. Comments poured in. You're such a strong mom, Judith. So selfless of you to raise such a driven young woman. Not one single tag. Not one acknowledgement. I scrolled and scrolled until my fingers hurt, but I didn't see my name anywhere. I closed the browser, shut the laptop, let the weight of it settle. It wasn't just the erasure, it was the repackaging, the way my silence had been used as space for their lies to grow. But I didn't scream. I didn't comment. Not yet, because silence, it cuts both ways. And I was done letting mine shield people who weaponized it. I was going to show the truth, but not in a status update. Not in another argument over coffee. The next time, I'd let the world see who they really were, and I'd do it in a way they couldn't delete or recaption. The sky outside was still the color of wet concrete when I sat down at my kitchen table, half awake, coffee barely touched. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. It was a Thursday, I think. Or maybe a Tuesday. They'd all started to blur. I opened my laptop and glanced at my inbox, and that's when I saw it. A forwarded email from Ellie, a friend in HR at a company I'd contracted for in the past. We weren't close, not really, but we had a quiet sort of understanding. She knew what I'd been through, at least some of it, and she clearly thought I deserved a heads up. The subject line was simple, chilling. Concern regarding employee behavior. I felt it before I even read the body of the message. That creeping sensation, like a drop in temperature. To whom it may concern. I'm reaching out because I'm concerned about Romy D's recent behavior. She's been emotionally erratic, has posted about family members online, and is exhibiting patterns of harassment. I fear for our safety, and I believe this should be on record should things escalate. Kaylee D. I read it again, slower, letting each word sink in like a stone dropped into water. Emotionally erratic, harassment, a threat. My name was in there, not veiled, not hinted at, written outright like a stain. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't someone blowing off steam in a private message. This was deliberate, a paper trail, an accusation dressed up in concern. My sister, my own sister, had sent this to my former workplace, to people who still trusted me, people who could have been future employers. She knew exactly what she was doing. I closed the laptop, sat back. Let the heat rise, not the explosive kind, not the kind that makes you scream or break something. This was colder, controlled, sharp around the edges. No, I wasn't going to cry. Not for her, not again. Instead, I reached for my phone, opened the folder I'd created months ago. Screenshots, transfers, texts, evidence. It started with money, tuition deposits, rent help, the time I paid for Kaylee's car insurance when Judith forgot. There were thank you messages, emoji-filled texts about how much she owed me. There was a whole life's worth of quiet support buried in those screenshots. I had receipts. The digital kind. The real kind. If Kaylee wanted a record, I'd give her one. But it wasn't going to HR, and it sure as hell wasn't staying private. I opened Reddit, logged into my throwaway. I'd been on our family drama for years, silently scrolling through stories that hit a little too close. Stories that made me feel less alone. I knew how this worked. I knew what would land. I began typing. My sister tried to have me kicked out of the graduation party I paid for. Then she wrote to my job saying I was unstable. Here's what really happened. I laid it all out. No exaggeration, no name-calling, just the facts, the payment confirmations, the texts thanking me, the Venmo history, the emails, the screenshots of her public posts calling Judith a supermom, conveniently leaving out the person who'd fronted the costs when our dad dropped the ball. I wrote like I was filing a report. Calm, clear, chronological, and then I ended it with a single line. Silence protects abusers. I'm done being quiet. I hit post. Then I waited. The response didn't trickle in. It came like a wave. 1,000 upvotes in the first hour. Comments piling up, hundreds of them. By lunchtime, it was on the front page of the subreddit. By evening, people were messaging me privately. Strangers, kind strangers. Some angry, some heartbroken. All saying the same thing. You're not crazy. This happened to me too. This is emotional abuse. You're brave for speaking out. I didn't answer them all, just read, took a breath, sat with it. And then my phone rang. Kaylee. I let it go dark, then it buzzed again. A text from Judith. Take it down, now. You're hurting the family. I stared at it for a while. Not out of shock, but recognition. This was her pattern. When things got uncomfortable, when the illusion cracked, she'd pull rank. The family. As if that meant something when it was convenient. As if I hadn't been cut out of the picture for years. I typed back, You erased me for years. This is me reclaiming space. No reply. For the first time, I didn't care. Because this wasn't just about one graduation party or one email to HR. It was about years of being edited out, scrubbed clean from our family's narrative, the steady denial of my role, my support, my existence. I'd been the strong one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need anything. Turns out people don't see what they're determined to erase. But now, the story was out there. And this time, it wasn't being told by someone else. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't rage. It was something deeper. Truth. And it hit harder than I ever could. It never happens all at once. People don't just flip like a light switch. They drift. They recalibrate. They start pulling back in quiet ways. Less eye contact, shorter replies. The subtle delay when they're deciding whether to stand beside you or stay silent. You feel the shift long before anyone says anything. It's the slow unraveling that hurts the most. That's how I learned who had been quietly watching all along, who had their doubts but said nothing, who had already left me behind and just hadn't said it out loud yet. So when the knock came that morning, I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not them. It was raining, a steady gray curtain of drizzle that turned the street into a soft blur. And on my porch, without a text or a warning, stood Marlene and Adrian. Adrian held a small envelope, the edges curling with damp. He looked like he hadn't slept, hair a little messy, shirt half tucked like he'd left in a hurry. His voice cracked a little when he spoke. I owe you more than this, he said, but I had to start somewhere. He handed me the envelope. Inside, $60 in cash and a folded note in his careful, neat handwriting. One lunch for each month. I acted like you didn't matter. I didn't move for a second. Not because of the money, it wasn't about that, but because it was the first time someone from that side of the family had actually looked me in the eye and said, I failed you. Behind him, Marlene stood clutching her tote bag, curls damp against her forehead. I used to think you were just intense, she said, shrugging like the words tasted strange. Too emotional, too much. But now I know. You weren't crazy. You were just outnumbered. We didn't say much else. Just sat in the front room for a while. No small talk, no forced apologies. Just the kind of quiet that fills in the cracks when someone's trying, really trying, to make it right. And honestly, that was enough. For now. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Another name I hadn't expected. Grandpa Harold. Can we talk? I'm nearby. We met at a diner neither of us liked, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and old vinyl, with cracked red booths and menus that hadn't changed since 1994. But it was quiet. Neutral ground. That's all I needed. He leaned in across the table, both hands wrapped around his mug like he was anchoring himself. You know, he said, I was at the house last week. Nobody saw me come in. Judith and Walter were in the kitchen. I heard them talking about Kaylee, about how they spun the whole thing. He took a sip, eyes never leaving mine. They laughed, Romy, like it was funny, like what they did to you was just strategy. I didn't say a word. I just stared down at the cracked formica between us. Something about the pattern reminded me of veins under skin, fractured and fragile. They think people forget, he said, but I didn't, and now neither will anyone else. I nodded slowly. You used to say silence was power, I said. He nodded back. It is, until it starts protecting the wrong side. That night, another message. Instagram this time. A name I hadn't seen in years. Jamie, high school classmate, now married to one of Kaylee's friends. We hadn't spoken in forever. Hey, this might be weird, but I think you need to hear this. Attached, a voice memo, 5 minutes long. I hesitated, then hit play. There was laughter at first, someone chewing gum, casual chaos. Then Kaylee's voice, sharp and clear. She's basically my personal ATM. She'll cave, she always does. A pause. Then a quiet voice on the call whispered, That's cold. Kaylee again. Please, guilt is cheaper than gratitude. My stomach didn't even drop. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't shock you when you already know it. It just confirms what you hoped you were wrong about. Jamie's follow-up text came a second later. I was added by accident. Stayed to see how far it'd go. I saved that before they kicked me out. I stared at the screen. No anger, just clarity. Then I sent the file to the same subreddit as before. No need for explanation. I titled it, Turns out I wasn't crazy, just surrounded by people who profited from the lie. It blew up faster than the last one. Thousands of comments, thousands of upvotes. This family's a masterclass in manipulation. Guilt is cheaper than gratitude? That line belongs in a psych textbook. I hope she never gives them another second of peace. Then came the ripple effect. Distant cousins messaged. One of them, Aunt Martha, quietly left the family group chat for the second time in 6 months. Adrian posted a public comment under the Reddit thread. Romy isn't bitter, she's brave, there's a difference. And Kaylee? Nothing. Her Instagram went silent. Stories vanished, comments locked, profile blank. But I knew she was still watching. People like her don't walk away. They monitor, they wait, they look for new angles. But the control she used to have, it was slipping through her fingers, one truth at a time. For the first time, this story wasn't just mine to carry alone. It had weight now. Echo. A paper trail of belief and receipts and witnesses. The carefully crafted image of our perfect little family wasn't untouchable anymore. The glass was cracking, and Kaylee knew exactly who threw the first stone. The mail slot rattled once and fell silent. I didn't expect anything, especially not that day. It was early, just after 8. The sun barely lit the kitchen. I was still barefoot, coffee half brewed. But there it was on the floor, an envelope. Brown, thick, no return address. I didn't recognize the handwriting on the front, but the second I peeled it open, I knew exactly what it was. The will, a scanned copy, highlighted, annotated, with one glaring omission, me. Everything, every asset, every heirloom, every dollar went to Kaylee. Not even a mention of my name. No in the event of pod clause. No beloved daughter Romy. Nothing. I sat at the kitchen table staring at it for what felt like hours. The steam from my coffee had long faded. I wasn't surprised, but the brutality of it still knocked the air out of me. I forwarded the document to Grandpa Harold. It took him less than 10 minutes to call back. That's recent, he said. That isn't the will we saw 2 years ago. Then another call came through. Eleanor. She hadn't reached out in ages, not since before Mom and Dad's anniversary mess. Judith didn't tell anyone, she whispered. She said you were too dramatic to deserve anything real. I laughed. bitter and full. Dramatic? Or just no longer silent? Eleanor didn't answer, but her pause said enough. 2 days later, I was at Judith's house. No warning, no invitation, just walked in with the envelope in hand. Kaylee was curled on the couch in matching loungewear. Walter sat at the dining table flipping through a newspaper like he was auditioning for Passive Patriarch of the Year. I dropped the document on the table between them. No theatrics. Let's stop spinning. One conversation, one moment of honesty. That's all I want. Judith stood at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, looking like she was about to deliver a speech. She opened her mouth, but I didn't let her get to the second syllable. If your love was conditional, say that. If your version of family requires silence and service, just admit it. Don't dress it up like care. Walter finally looked up. That's not fair. I locked eyes with him. What's not fair is rewriting history and calling it healing. No one replied. I turned toward Kaylee. She met my gaze for half a second before reaching for her phone. Don't, I warned. If you're going to record this to make me look unhinged again, at least wait until I leave. She dropped the phone. I stepped back, taking in the house. The same furniture, the same photos on the mantel, the same curated image. This place isn't mine. It never was. I just funded the illusion. Judith tried again. You don't understand. I cut her off one last time. I do. I understand more than you ever gave me credit for. I left the house without another word. By the time I got home, I had already uploaded the will to the same Reddit thread. The caption was simple. Let's stop pretending this was ever about family. It was about ownership. Within hours, the comments were on fire. This is next-level manipulation. She gave them everything and got erased for it. Where do I send Romy flowers? That night, Kaylee deleted her Instagram. Judith's Facebook suddenly went private. Eleanor sent me a text. I didn't know. I really didn't. I believed her. Partially. But I wasn't in the business of making people feel better anymore. Not if it came at the cost of my own peace. Harold called that evening just to say, proud of you. I didn't cry. I just looked out the window, breathed in, and let the silence settle. Not heavy this time, but earned. The kind of quiet you get after telling your truth and watching it land. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding up a family. I was finally holding up myself. The sun rose a little differently that morning. Or maybe I just noticed it for the first time in a while. I drove through the city without the usual tension in my chest. No tight grip on the steering wheel, no mental rehearsals of conversations that would never go the way I hoped. 3 weeks had passed since everything cracked open, since I stopped trying to tape it all back together. Since I chose myself, not out of spite, but out of necessity. I parked outside the nonprofit office, a shared space with creaky floors and peeling paint. But it had windows that let the light in, and for the first time in years, I did too. Inside, my desk sat bare, no framed photos, no plants, just a clean surface waiting to be filled. I slid my laptop out of its sleeve and opened the calendar. The day was full, grant follow-ups, outreach emails, a Zoom call with a youth shelter director. And I was excited, not anxious, not dreading, just grounded. I had a title now, Director of Outreach, not assistant to anyone, not someone's second choice, no strings attached. The salary was modest, the schedule was flexible, the purpose, mine. I didn't hear from Kaylee anymore. Her profile was still private, no new content. Her silence was loud in its own way, but it no longer echoed inside me. My phone buzzed around lunchtime. Grandpa Harold, like clockwork. You eat yet? He asked. Not yet, about to. You working too hard? No harder than I want to. He laughed. That's new. We kept it short. We always did. But it was enough. Just knowing someone was still in my corner with no agenda attached. An hour later, Eleanor dropped by the office with a small container of muffins. No grand gestures, no explanations, just thought you might be too busy to grab something. I thanked her. She smiled, but I could see it. Her eyes had changed. Softer, more present. Maybe she'd seen enough now to stop pretending she never saw before. The thing is, no one ever said, I'm sorry. Not Judith, not Walter, not Kaylee, and I didn't expect them to. I no longer needed their words to validate my story. Their absence spoke louder anyway. Later that week, I got an email from a small liberal arts college downtown. They were hosting a panel on resilience and requested me as a speaker. "We've followed your posts," the message said. "Would you consider sharing your story? There are students who feel invisible within their own families." I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying, "Yes, I'd be honored." It wasn't about reliving the pain. It was about telling the truth where it mattered, giving language to people who still didn't know how to say, "That wasn't okay." On Friday, I stopped by the neighborhood cafe. My usual table by the window was open. I sat with my laptop, a muffin, and a second coffee for no one in particular. Just habit or hope. I scrolled past Kaylee's profile one more time, locked down tight. A few comments from strangers still lingered beneath old photos. Most were gone. I didn't type anything, didn't screenshot, didn't share. I just sat back and exhaled. It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was release. Some wounds don't get stitched up with apologies. Some heal in silence over time when you finally stop handing the scalpel to the people who cut you. That evening, as I walked back to my car, I passed by a glass window and caught my reflection. Not tired, not bitter, just whole. The kind of whole that doesn't beg to be believed. The kind that no longer needs proof. Harold called that night. We didn't talk about the family. We talked about tomatoes, his garden, the dog next door that kept digging holes under his fence. I laughed more than I thought I could. Before bed, I opened my journal. Not to write pain, just to write. Ideas for the panel. Names of women I wanted to invite. A quote I'd heard once and never forgotten. "You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." I underlined it twice. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and slept with the window open. Because for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't afraid of what the morning might bring. You know, I used to think that keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. That loyalty was measured by how much pain you could swallow without flinching. That being the strong one meant disappearing behind everyone else's story. But here's what I've learned. Silence doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible, and no one deserves to feel erased inside their own family. Speaking up isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your name, your truth, and your place in the world. It's about saying, "I was here, I mattered, and I won't let your version of me be the only one that exists." To anyone watching this who's ever felt dismissed, diminished, or written out, you are not alone. And you don't need a permission slip to matter. You don't have to scream to be powerful. Sometimes the quietest decisions, walking away, standing firm, choosing peace, make the loudest echoes. So let me ask you, have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and keeping yourself? Or maybe you've watched someone else be mistreated and stayed quiet. Would you do it differently now? Leave a comment and tell me where you're from, or drop a 1 if this story struck a chord with you. And hey, if this video spoke to your heart, if it made you feel seen, or reminded you that you're not crazy for wanting more, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Because here, we don't just tell stories, we tell truths, and sometimes that's how healing begins. Hi, I'm Margaret, and my sister turned my worst breakdown into a runway look, not a tribute, not an inspired by moment. She took the sketch I drew during a seizure, when I couldn't speak, couldn't move, and made it the grand finale of her fashion show. The audience clapped. Vogue called it brave. And my name? Never spoken. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was hearing my own mother say, "Some people are born to shine. Others are born to reflect it." So I stayed quiet, until someone else finally said the truth out loud. But now I wonder, how many people applauded my pain before they realized who it belonged to? My apartment always smells like paper and lavender. Not because I want it to, but because that's what comfort ended up smelling like. I live on the east side of Portland in a 2-room unit above a florist. The floors creak when I walk. The walls don't keep secrets, but the quiet hum of it all, it lets me breathe. I've lived here for 6 years. Alone, mostly by choice. I work from home. I draw, design, sometimes consult for local artists. And when it gets too loud in my head, I reach for the sketchbook. Not because I'm chasing beauty. I don't draw what people want to see. I draw what I need to say. The noise, the static, the parts of me that never learned how to fit into polite conversation. I was scrolling through my laptop that evening, just killing time before bed. My sister's name showed up on a banner ad. Isolde Marshall presents Unraveled, a fashion experience. I nearly laughed. Of course, another show, another city. Isolde had always known how to dress up ambition in silk and shimmer. But as the ad expanded into a slideshow, my laughter dropped cold. The second image stopped me. It wasn't just familiar. It was mine. A model, wrapped in jagged pleats of iridescent fabric, curled into a posture I knew better than my own reflection. Her shoulders bent forward, arms pulled tight across the body. A mask-like hood, layered in translucent shades of blue, veiled her face. I didn't just recognize the design. I recognized the feeling. It was sensory shell. I'd drawn it 8 months ago, after a particularly rough week in therapy. It wasn't meant for eyes. It was meant for understanding, for me. A way to map the shutdowns, the overload, the days when light stabbed instead of shining. And I had only shown that sketch to one person. Isolde came over back in the fall, pretending to care about my new paper. She flipped through pages casually, commented on the textures. When she got to that page, she paused for just a second too long. Then she smiled. Not the kind that says, "I see you." The kind that says, "I can use this." She asked if she could borrow the sketchbook, said she liked the way the pages felt. She brought it back 2 days later. I didn't check it right away, and when I did, that sketch, sensory shell, was gone. I told myself I'd misplaced it, told myself a lot of things, but now, seeing it reimagined, repackaged, titled The Final Piece, I knew better. I didn't call her. What would I say? That I knew she took it? She'd just say it was inspired by, not stolen. That we shared influences. That I should be flattered. Instead, I closed my laptop and went to the bookshelf, pulled out the sketchbook. I flipped through it slowly. One page missing, cleanly torn out. No accidental rip. No hint of hesitation. She called it collaboration once. Told an interviewer years ago, "My sister has always been a well of creative chaos. I just try to catch the waves." That used to make me feel seen. Now it makes me want to disappear. Exactly 7 days later, a thick white envelope arrived. No return address. Just a wax seal with the letter M for Marshall pressed into the back. I opened it on the kitchen counter with scissors. Inside was a creamy folded card, decked in soft rose foil. Elegant, overproduced. You are cordially invited to the Los Angeles debut of Isolde, Unraveled, a fashion experience. I stared at the title. The font. Even the envelope smelled like citrus and control. Then I looked down. My name, spelled correctly. My title, Special Guest, The Muse. I set the card down, walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, let it run. I wasn't sure what stung more, being erased completely or being rewritten as ornamental. They didn't call me co-creator, not artist, not contributor, just a muse. That's the thing about being a muse. It means they credit your existence, not your work. You're not the architect, you're the aesthetic. Being called a muse is like being called a mirror, I muttered aloud, useful only when someone else is looking into it. I didn't call Isolde. I didn't call our mother either. She would have just said something like, "This is huge, honey, what an honor." And I would have nodded, and then swallowed it like I always did. That night, I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, the envelope still sitting untouched on the kitchen counter. I wasn't angry, not exactly, just less surprised than I should have been. That's what scared me most. I pulled out my headphones, the noise putty, my small sketch pad, not for comfort. This time, I was packing them like armor. I opened the airline website, booked a flight to LA, mid-morning departure, direct, and I whispered to no one, "If I say nothing, who will?" She called me her muse, But I remember the day she traced my pain in pencil and never gave it back. The plane ride down was uneventful, but I didn't sleep. Couldn't. My thoughts kept folding in on themselves like crumpled paper, sharp at the edges, useless for comfort. Los Angeles greeted me with its usual chaos: sunshine that felt performative, billboards that shouted everything, and people moving fast, like they had somewhere better to be. No one waited for me at the airport. I didn't expect them to. I caught a rideshare, let the driver talk about the Dodgers and traffic, and whatever else filled the silence. I nodded when needed, stared out the window most of the ride. 15 minutes later, I checked into a modest hotel near the venue. The room was clean but dim. The overhead light flickered, just enough to make me notice, not enough to complain. I unpacked slowly. Headphones, sketchbook, noise putty, all there. I lined them up on the nightstand like soldiers. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and reached for my phone. I told myself I'd scroll a little, check the weather maybe. Instead, I opened Instagram. Isolda's face was the third post on my feed. She looked flawless, as always. Slicked hair, muted tones, posing like the world needed to catch up to her. Below the photo, a caption: "So honored to share how empathy drives my work. Thank you, Vogue Digital." I clicked the link. The article was headlined, "Designing Through Empathy: The Sister Who Changed My Life." My name wasn't in the title, but I wasn't surprised. I skimmed. Paragraph after paragraph, Isolde painted our childhood like a Jane Austen novel, filled with compassion, resilience, sisterhood. She spoke of having a neurodivergent sibling and how it inspired her to explore perception through fabric. Not a single name, no quote, no mention of the sketches, the therapy, the breakdowns. She said, "Growing up around difference taught me how to translate feeling into form." Then added, "This collection is a tribute to those who experience the world uniquely." Those who? Not me. My face flushed, not with embarrassment, but heat. Anger, maybe. I whispered aloud, "I'm not a concept. I'm your sister." But of course, sisters don't sell. Stories do. She talked about those people, the differently abled, their inner worlds. Every word was a gentle erasure. I wasn't erased like chalk. I was painted over in soft pastels. And that's worse, because it pretends to be kind. I threw my phone on the comforter and stared at the ceiling. The flickering bulb above pulsed like it was mocking me. I didn't go out that evening. I stayed in, ordered takeout I barely touched, and flipped on the hotel's tiny TV for background noise. Around 10, a notification buzzed. Isolde's PR team had posted a behind-the-scenes video. I clicked it, hesitated, then let it play. The screen filled with soft focus clips, models getting their makeup done, swaths of fabric pinned onto mannequins, laughter backstage. A voiceover, Isolde's, spoke about intention, integrity, impact. Then came the interviews. I remembered giving one myself, months ago. Someone on her team had asked me to talk about where the idea of sensory shell came from. I'd stumbled through it, nervous but honest. I used the word shut down. I said, "It's not about drama, it's about survival." I even smiled a little at the end. That clip? Gone. Instead, the screen cut to a model saying, "She told us she wanted to embody what it feels like to live in a different brain. I thought that was beautiful." Another stylist chimed in about the courage it takes to tell someone else's story. Then Isolde's voice came back, soft and serious. "This is for the people who can't speak for themselves, so we speak through fashion." I sat up straighter. People who can't speak? I've been speaking. You just chose not to hear me. I closed the laptop slowly, pressed my palms together like I was praying for patience. But I wasn't praying, I was plotting. For a minute, I thought about packing up, flying home, letting her have it all. The runway, the applause, the rewritten version of our history. But then I remembered something my therapist once told me. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. I didn't text her. I didn't email the PR team. I didn't scream into the void. Instead, I opened a draft email to someone else. Leorin. He'd been Isolde's creative consultant on a few past shows. Quiet guy. Precise. The kind who notices everything but says nothing unless you ask the right question. I wrote, "There's something you need to know, and I think you already do." I didn't hit send, not yet. But I saved it. That was enough for tonight. She said this show was for those who couldn't speak. But what happens when they can? And you mute them anyway. I didn't expect a reply overnight, but I also didn't expect what showed up the next morning. A red carpet. It was plastered across the homepage of the event website. Unraveled. Grand debut tonight, featuring the final piece, Shell of Light. I clicked. The page loaded slow, as if daring me to regret it. There it was. Center frame, high-res, full-body shot of a model wearing the design. My design. The silhouette was unmistakable. Layers of iridescent fabric mimicked pressure points, folded just so around the torso. The sleeves were asymmetrical, one snug, the other loose, meant to convey imbalance. Even the subtle overlay of translucent mesh across the head. That was mine. My lines, my discomfort, my therapy translated into texture. I stared at it too long. My eyes began to sting, not because I was crying, just dry, like my body was tired of wasting moisture on shock. It was called Shell of Light, which was almost funny if it didn't feel like the kind of joke told at someone else's funeral. A funeral for the part of me that believed I could trust her, even a little. I closed the tab, picked up my sketchbook, flipped to the section where that drawing should have been. A single torn edge remained, smooth and intentional, like someone had removed it with care, because they knew it mattered. I remembered Isolde's fingers brushing that page, months ago, pretending to admire the paper grain. I whispered, "You didn't just take my page. You took what held me together." I sat still for a long time. Then I opened my phone and dialed. It rang twice before my mother answered. "Margaret?" Her voice was cheery, guarded. I could hear her setting down a coffee mug. "I just need to ask you something," I said. "Of course," she replied. "Did Isolde ever tell you where she got the idea for her final piece in the show?" There was a beat. Then two. "Well, she's always said you inspired her, sweetheart. I mean, you've had your challenges, and she's always been very sensitive to that." That word again, challenges, like I was a pop quiz life, gave her that she had to pass. I asked, more pointed this time. "Did she say it was my design?" Another pause, longer. "She didn't say that exactly. But Margaret, you've always been so creative, and Isolde, well, she's making something real from it. She's putting it out into the world." My jaw tightened. Then she added gently, like she thought she was helping, "You should be proud. People like her don't always talk about family." "People like her." I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just ended the call. I walked outside the hotel and started walking aimlessly through the neighborhood. My phone stayed in my pocket. The sky had turned to that burnt gray that Los Angeles pretends is normal. The sidewalks were cracked, trees too perfect, murals trying too hard. I passed a storefront selling hand-woven rugs. The next building had a children's therapy center, its windows painted with bright shapes, bubble letters, and inside, through the glass, I saw a kid tapping a sensory board with intense focus. I kept walking. "When someone rewrites your story," I murmured, "they don't just erase you, they erase your place in the room." That's what it felt like. Not erased, but removed. Repositioned. I wasn't the architect. I wasn't even a brick. I was background, reframed as concept, sold as novelty. I remembered a line from a Maya Angelou book I'd underlined years ago. "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you." And I wasn't going to carry this silence any longer. Not just mine, but everyone else's who'd been called muse when they were really material. That night, I sat on the bed, reopened the draft email to Leoran. The screen blinked at me like it was waiting. I added 2 lines. They used my story. And now they're monetizing my silence. "I think you know this. I hope you do." I hovered for half a second, then clicked send. I didn't feel lighter. I felt louder. I hit send. And this time, if silence follows, it won't be mine. The next morning, I woke to a notification buzzing through my phone before the sun had fully risen. Groggy, I swiped it open, half expecting it to be spam or a flight reminder. But there it was. Subject line, bold and impossible to ignore. Your runway access tonight, 7 p.m. I blinked. I never RSVP'd. I hadn't clicked any links, responded to any PR outreach. And yet, there it was. My name, front and center, attached to a QR code and a personal seat assignment. When you're not part of the design, I muttered, you become the backdrop. I took a shower that felt more like a rinse, put on black, nothing flashy. I wasn't going to support, I was going to witness. The venue was as expected. Downtown, overly lit, self-aware in that painfully curated way. Everything from the signage to the scent piped through the vents, screamed exclusivity. I walked in alone, scanned my code, nodded at no one. Inside, the space was humming. People in designer clothes floated past, champagne in hand, congratulating each other on future successes that hadn't happened yet. My seat was toward the back, intentional, I was sure, but I didn't mind. It gave me the distance to see everything. The lights dimmed. Music rose. Something dissonant, industrial, layered with whispers. On the screen behind the runway, a title appeared in flickering white. Meltdown Look. My breath caught. The model appeared like she'd been shoved onto the stage. Her gait was jerky, unsteady, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her hair was wild, matted, mascara smeared down her face like rainfall. The outfit wrapped around her body in layers, tight in all the wrong places, leaving her vulnerable in others. I recognized it instantly. I had drawn that after my worst breakdown in college, the one where I couldn't speak for 2 days, where even the sound of my own breath felt too loud. I'd sketched it as a way to document what words couldn't reach, what it felt like to drown while still breathing. Now it was a fashion statement. The crowd gasped in awe. Then applause. One voice behind me said, "So raw, so brave of Isolde to channel that." Brave? I dug my nails into the palm of my hand and whispered, "It wasn't brave. It was stolen." I didn't cry. I memorized. Scene after scene followed. Themes of distortion, containment, echo, all eerily familiar. Then came a model wearing what looked like a belt made of small, glinting discs. The spotlight caught one, and for a split second, I froze. Fidget spinners. Glitterized. Color-coded. Blue. With a chipped edge. They weren't just props. They were mine. I had used them during tactile therapy. They'd helped me stay grounded, helped me sit through group sessions without unraveling. I kept them in a velvet pouch. Once, years ago, Isolde had picked one up from my desk and said, "This thing's so ugly it might be high fashion." And now it was. The audience oohed like they were at a fireworks show. Applause again. Someone said, "Genius! Taking childhood and making it couture?" It wasn't childhood, it was survival. And here it was, twisted into accessory. Pain looks so cheerful when you don't have to carry it. I said to myself. I stayed until the end. Didn't leave early. I didn't want to give her that. When the lights came up, I slipped out the back exit, avoiding the lobby where the press had started to swarm. The alley behind the venue was quiet. I sat on a metal bench near the loading dock, breathing in the sharp smell of dust and diesel. I pulled out my phone, opened notes. Title, Documentation. Line 1, Meltdown Look, inspired by July Breakdown, 2016. No credit. Line 2, Blue spinner belt, identical to Model 4 used in OT. No credit. Line 3, Laoran? Waiting. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't rage online. I recorded. The worst kind of erasure isn't when they forget you. It's when they remember, and still choose to pretend you never mattered. If they wanted my silence to be stylish, I'd let it look like a lawsuit. I barely slept. The silence in my inbox was louder than the noise outside the hotel window. Horns, deliveries, late-night drunks yelling about the Lakers. But inside my phone, nothing. No reply from Leoran. Just a headline from an industry blog that made my stomach turn. I sold his masterpiece, meltdown as modernism. There it was, my breakdown, rebranded as high art, framed with words like brave and visionary, like she'd reached into the storm of someone else's trauma and decided it would look better under spotlights. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stared at the screen until the brightness blurred and the room faded into shapes. And then I wrote again. This time, I didn't bother with pleasantries. You knew, didn't you? No sign-off, no padding, just those 5 words. Still no reply. Later that afternoon, I found myself in a pop-up gallery space near Wilshire. One of Isolde's making-of installations had opened to the public. It was meant to feel organic, spontaneous, edgy, but it felt calculated. On one wall, credits were printed on matte vinyl. Designers, models, stylists, sponsors. Then, creative consultant, Lioran M. There it was, plain as daylight. I walked up to a young woman arranging a set of catalogs near the front. "Excuse me," I said gently. "Is Lioran here today?" She blinked fast. "He's not available. He's not commenting on any design elements. He's under NDA." I took a beat. So he wasn't allowed to say the concept came from me? She didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't think he was supposed to know." That stung more than I expected. I nodded, thanked her, turned away. My heels echoed on the concrete floor as I walked out. In my chest, something shifted. Not a snap, but a quiet click. A recognition. Even the people closest to the process weren't free to tell the truth. Or worse, they were free and chose not to. You can't call something art if you gag the witness. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the bed, boots still on. I was scrolling through short clips on my phone, half out of habit, half searching for something. When I stopped on a TikTok, it looked like a casual behind-the-scenes montage. Models adjusting their hair, stylists fussing with pins, someone laughing off camera. Then a voice, clear as day. "This meltdown thing?" a man said, snorting. "Totally inspired by her autistic sister, I think. Brilliant branding." Another voice chimed in, low and amused. "Yeah, she said it came from one of the drawings the sister used to make when she freaked out." Laughter. I didn't breathe. I played it again. And again. And a third time, because somehow hearing it repeatedly made it feel more real, not less. My name wasn't mentioned, but my diagnosis was. My life was. Twisted into a punchline. Reduced to marketing. I downloaded the clip, saved it in a new folder, named it Evidence 1. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Isolde. I didn't throw my phone across the room, even though I wanted to. Instead, I opened my laptop. There was a contact buried deep in my inbox, someone a former colleague once referred me to. A soft introduction that never turned into anything. The subject line read, "In case you ever feel exploited." I hit reply. Attach the clip, the screenshots, the names, the dates. Then I typed, "They used my story, erased my name, and built their brand on top of my silence. I'm done being quiet." The final line took me the longest. I was erased. Now I'm naming every line they wrote over me. Then I pressed send. If I was their uncredited story, I'd make sure I became their headline. The first ping came before I even got out of bed. Not from my attorney, not from the press. It was from the artist collective I'd been part of for over 2 years. Subject line, update preferences confirmation. Except, I hadn't updated anything. I clicked through. My profile was gone. Not just removed from the newsletter, erased entirely. My name had vanished from the featured artists list. Even the blurb I'd written about art and sensory processing had been stripped from the archive. No explanation, no apology, just digital silence. I refreshed the page twice, as if it would reverse itself. It didn't. I sent an email to the admin, a woman named Rita, who'd once hugged me after a gallery talk. No reply. 2 hours later, I texted Lainey, a young textile artist I'd mentored last spring. She responded within minutes. "Hey, can I call you?" She sounded nervous before I even said hello. "Lainey?" I asked. I don't know how to say this, but I think they felt your posts and everything were getting too intense. I let her talk. I guess they thought the messaging didn't align with the collective's tone anymore. You know, after everything with Isolde. "You mean the truth?" I said, too flat. Lainey hesitated. "They're scared, Margaret. Isolde's big now. You've seen the coverage. No one wants to be dragged into a feud. I'm sorry." I ended the call before she could offer more soft words that wouldn't mean a thing. That afternoon, I walked to a small coffee shop near the hotel. It was quiet, mostly students and freelancers with headphones in. I sat near the window and scrolled through Instagram without even thinking. Then I saw it. A press release posted by Isolde's publicist, corporate font, a pale pink background, no direct names. It's disappointing when private pain becomes public sabotage. Envy wears many costumes, some with paint, some with noise. I didn't need a name to know who it was aimed at. The comments poured in like they always did. "She's clearly just bitter." "Jealous much?" Where was she when Isolde was building this brand from scratch? I read each one, not because I believed them, but because it mattered to see what the world believed about me. And I didn't reply. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't rush to defend myself. I just took a screenshot, saved it in a folder labeled Spin. Back at the hotel, I opened my case file. Every screenshot, every link, every statement that bent the truth into something softer for public consumption. I labeled them by date. I didn't bother with metaphors. I didn't dress it up in eloquence. This wasn't art, this was evidence. I sent an email to my attorney that night. It was short. Subject line, "I'm ready." The body of the message had only one sentence. They said I was jealous. I'll show them what envy sounds like when it's read aloud in court. If they wanted me quiet, they should have stayed honest. The following morning, I opened my phone to a voice I hadn't heard in months. My mother's. Not a voicemail, not a text. It was a podcast clip. It had already gone viral. Title, "Raising a Visionary, One Mother's Story." I didn't click it immediately, just stared at the thumbnail. Her face, pleasant, polished, seated across from a woman who built her brand on values and family truth. I was still in bed, knees drawn up, pillow folded under my arms. And against my better judgment, I pressed play. "Raising 2 daughters was never easy," she said, her tone soft and calculated. "One always needed extra care. The other, she needed extra courage." The host chuckled. "Which one's the visionary?" "Isolde," my mother answered, without hesitation. She took what she saw in her sister's struggles and turned it into beauty the world can understand. My hands tightened around the phone. The host laughed again. "So Margaret inspired her?" My mother's reply came like silk over a blade. "Some people are born to shine. Others are born to reflect that shine back." I stopped the recording. That wasn't love. That was narrative management. And I wasn't family. I was footnote. I tossed the phone onto the bed. Not because I was angry, because I was done pretending the surprise still stung. That kind of pain doesn't hit the same after the 3rd or 4th repetition. It just hums in the background like a bad hotel air conditioner. Around noon, I walked to a small diner around the corner. Ordered black coffee and eggs I didn't finish. The podcast clip kept playing in my head, looping, drilling in that line. Born to reflect. They didn't talk about me like I was alive. They talked about me like I was a character they'd edited out. Back at the hotel, I checked my email, hoping for distraction. Instead, I found a different kind of betrayal waiting. Subject: "Unfortunately, we need to reschedule." It was from a podcast I had recorded with weeks earlier, an episode that was supposed to go live the following Monday. The body of the message was sanitized, but the point was clear. We want to stay neutral. We can't risk platforming active legal matters. Neutral, I replied before I could talk myself out of it. You platformed my trauma when it came from someone else's mouth. Now that I speak, you go silent. No response. Later that evening, Isolde posted a video, a softly lit reel of her sipping tea, watching the sunset from a balcony. Her caption read, "Silence isn't weakness, it's choosing peace." Comments flooded in. Queen energy. She's so gracious. Ignore the noise. Noise. That's what they called me now. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I closed the app. This wasn't about matching them anymore. It was about outlasting them. The next morning, I stepped into a local bookstore near the edge of Koreatown, the kind with crooked shelves and too many handwritten signs. I bought a journal with a plain black cover, no prompts, no lines. On the first page, I wrote one sentence. If this is the version they want, they'll have to face the footnotes. That night, I didn't scroll. I didn't check for mentions. I sketched. For the first time in weeks, I picked up a pencil and started drawing not to document pain, but to process it. They muted my story in every room I walked into. Time to build my own mic. The message came in just after sunrise, a quiet buzz under my palm as I reached for my phone on the nightstand. It was a direct message on Instagram from someone I didn't follow. Just one line. You might want to see this. Attached, a TikTok clip. The caption read, Did Isolde just say this about her own sister? I tapped play without thinking. The video was grainy, clearly shot in a backstage setting, flashes of mannequins, light chatter, soft laughter, and then, unmistakably, her voice. Isolde. She won't even know, she was saying to a stylist lightly, like she was sharing a joke. Margaret doesn't process things the way we do. She thinks differently. She won't notice. The stylist laughed. You sure? Isolde smirked. Even if she does, who's gonna believe her? I stared at the screen. My pulse thudded slow, then fast. I didn't blink. Just watched her say it again and again. They didn't cut away. They didn't edit it for nuance. It was raw, blunt, smug. The comments flooded in. She just admitted it. This isn't inspiration, it's manipulation. I have a sibling on the spectrum. This hurts to watch. I saved the video to my phone. Then I played it again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat on the bed and let the words wrap around me like old wool. Scratchy, familiar, too tight. It didn't matter that I'd known. Hearing her say it? That was different. That was truth out loud. And the truth had a timestamp. I didn't have to explain anymore. I didn't have to defend. She had handed me the match, and the whole world had already seen the smoke. 3 hours later, I was still in my room, wrapped in a hoodie, drinking lukewarm coffee, when my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a live stream notification. Leoran. He hadn't posted anything since the show. Nothing since he'd gone eerily quiet after I messaged him. And now, suddenly, he was live. I joined the stream with shaking fingers. He was alone in a white room, bare wall behind him. He looked tired, but not weak. His voice was calm, measured, no theatrics. I've worked in fashion for 22 years, he began. I've collaborated with brilliance. And I've also witnessed theft dressed up as tribute. He paused. I'm speaking today because I was part of the early concept meetings for the Unraveled show. I saw the sketches. I saw where they came from. I saw Margaret's work referenced again and again, without her name, without her consent. My heart didn't race, it steadied. He continued, reading from emails, showing timestamps. There it was. My sketch, my notes, her design mood board, side by side, no commentary, just facts. Creativity, he said near the end, is not about who shouts the loudest. It's about who dared to feel first. And then he ended the stream. No applause, no drama, just silence. and a truth that echoed far louder than the music ever had. I didn't post anything, didn't comment. I saved the video, I recorded it, I backed it up, and I whispered to myself, staring at the ceiling. You didn't just borrow my voice. You tried to bury it. Now you hear it without filter. They tried to dress up my pain as art. Now the world sees what they stitched it with. By morning, the storm had moved from my inbox to the front page of half the internet. I hadn't posted a single word, but somehow the silence spoke louder now. Hashtags were everywhere. Not your muse. Justice for Margaret. Design is not redemption. I didn't smile. I didn't relax. I just watched. Brands that once boasted about their Isolde collabs were suddenly issuing values statements. One influencer, a wellness coach with 1 million followers, posted a video saying she was dropping out of a campaign. Her caption read, "I can't support creativity built on silence and stolen credit." I screenshotted it all. I didn't need to post. I was the story now, whether I wanted to be or not. By noon, another notification hit. This time from an account I didn't recognize. Anonymous, no profile picture, no bio. It linked to an audio file. I hesitated. Then hit play. It was her voice. Isolde, younger, sharper. Like I remembered her when we were both too tired to pretend. "Margaret always got the soft spot," she said, breathless, like venting in a car or corner of a party. "I had to be perfect just to be seen in that house." A pause, then quieter. "She acts like being different makes her special, like pain is a brand or something." I didn't listen again. I didn't need to. I deleted it. But not before saving the file name. She hadn't stolen my story because she admired me. She stole it because she couldn't stand the idea that people might look at me and not see brokenness, but beauty, that they might see me at all. I sat in that thought longer than I planned, until another notification popped up, this time with a familiar name. Elka. I remembered her vaguely. Tall, serious, wore flats when everyone else insisted on heels. She'd walked in the show, looked uncomfortable even then. Her post was long, an Instagram story broken into slides. Plain white background, black text, simple, no hashtags. I was part of Isolde's last show, and I regret it. She went on to describe the process, the secrecy, the way references were thrown around casually but never explained. "We weren't told the truth," she wrote. "The inspiration wasn't a character, it was a person, a sister, a story that wasn't hers." She admitted she'd been told not to ask questions. "Just walk. Don't think too much. It's fashion." Then she shared screenshots of emails, her stepping down from an upcoming campaign, walking away from a major contract. No press spin, no interview, just quiet truth. And it shook something in people. Comments poured in, not performative, but real. "She's brave for saying this. Takes guts to admit complicity." She just did what everyone else was too scared to. I screenshotted every frame, then closed my phone. For the first time since this began, I felt the floor under me shift. Not because I had forced it, but because someone else had finally stood up and said, "Enough." I pulled out the journal again, the one I'd written in at the bookstore. If this is the version they want, I picked up the pen. I'll release the one they're not ready for. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about ownership, about writing my own ending, not to erase hers, but to make sure mine wasn't buried underneath it. She wrapped herself in my pain, but forgot. I still hold the thread. The office was tucked between a smoothie shop and a real estate firm, but once you stepped inside, the tone shifted. Quiet, too cold. Air-conditioned silence made sharp by the faint smell of carpet glue and anxiety. I sat across from my attorney at a table meant for 6. The other side had 2 people, a legal rep and a publicist. No Isolde. Of course. The rep introduced himself, tried to open with pleasantries, but I cut him off. "I'm not here to discuss feelings," I said. "I'm here to set the record." My attorney slid the folder across the table. Thick, organized, methodical. Inside were the dates, the sketches, my original drawings, emails showing timelines, screenshots of TikToks, transcripts of Lyoran's livestream, Elka's resignation, the voice memo. It was all there, everything that proved what they'd taken and what they tried to bury. They flipped through slowly. The publicist didn't meet my eyes. "We're willing to discuss a resolution," the legal rep said. "Privately. No media statements. A quiet arrangement." I leaned forward. "You weren't quiet when it was your version." He cleared his throat. "This industry thrives on mutual respect." "And I gave mine," I cut in. "But you didn't return it." My attorney spoke up. "Our request is straightforward. A formal acknowledgement of Margaret as original contributor. Compensation for unlicensed intellectual use. A joint statement." The room thickened. They didn't nod. They didn't argue. They just stalled. "If you don't name me," I said evenly, "the court will." And that was the moment it shifted. Not because they agreed, but because they knew they had already lost the public. They were just trying to keep the walls from collapsing further. They asked for time to review. We gave them 48 hours. I walked out without shaking hands. Back at the hotel, something was waiting. A slim, flat box, wrapped in gray paper. No return address, just the initials. LM. I didn't open it right away. I made tea, took off my shoes, let the quiet settle around me like a familiar coat. Then I peeled the paper back. Inside was a single print, framed. My sketch. Not a copy. Not altered. It was sensory shell, exactly as I drew it. Re-inked, preserved, precise. At the bottom, in faint pencil, "For Margaret, the origin." I turned it over. A note taped gently to the back. "They copied your pain. I saw your power." I placed it next to my laptop, leaned it against the wall. No social post, no caption, just presence. Quiet proof that someone had seen. Not what they made of me, but who I really was. The next morning, I walked to the community art center 2 blocks away. Nothing fancy. Brick building, folding chairs, smelled like old paint and teenage effort. I asked if they had room for one more workshop this season. "Something around memory," I said. "Maybe. Storytelling through texture." The director smiled. "That sounds like something people need." I filled out the form that afternoon. No press, no PR. Just me and an open room. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a name, finely spelled right. In black ink, on white paper. They called me inspiration, but now they'll have to call me author. The gallery's reply came first thing Monday morning. My workshop proposal had been accepted. "Unwritten narratives, healing through visual texture," they wrote, with a warm line at the end. "We're honored to host your voice." It felt strange, seeing that word again. Voice. Like something I didn't have to fight for anymore. I stared at the confirmation email until it blurred, then closed the laptop gently. Let it be real without overthinking it. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. A message. Text. Short. "I saw what happened. I was wrong about you. I'm sorry." It was signed. Darian. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 5 years. We hadn't ended badly, just faded. He never understood the weight I carried. Not really. Back then, he called me sensitive, with a smile that made it sound like a flaw. Said I should stop taking things so personally. The message wasn't dramatic. No excuses. Just one more line. "If you ever want to talk, I'd like to listen this time." I didn't reply right away. I let it sit there. For hours. Later that night, wrapped in my favorite blanket, I typed just one sentence. "Thank you. That version of me needed to hear that, even if she's not here anymore." He responded within minutes. "She deserved better, you still do." I didn't smile because I needed it. I smiled because I didn't. And because sometimes acknowledgement doesn't fix the past, but it does ease the ache of having carried it alone, I took a screenshot of the thread. Not to post, not to prove anything, just to remind myself I wasn't imagining the erasure. 2 days later, I walked to a park I hadn't visited in years, the one Darian and I used to sit in on Sunday mornings. I found the same wooden bench, chipped and weather-worn, still facing that crooked fountain. No one else was around, just the sound of birds and the quiet crackle of wind in dry leaves. I opened my sketchbook, drew the bench from memory first, then from what I saw now. I didn't include either of us. I didn't make it symbolic, just let it be what it was. Some relationships don't need resurrection, just acknowledgement that they once existed. That night, I didn't frame the sketch. I didn't post about it. I folded the page, tucked it in the back pocket of the book, like a receipt. Quiet and complete. Back in my apartment, I opened my journal and wrote, "Closure doesn't ask for a bow. It just asks for silence you no longer dread." 2 weeks passed quietly. Then the final confirmation arrived. The workshop had a set date, set room, registration live. The location? Same gallery space where Isolde's first major show had premiered. Same walls, same windows. But this time, my name was on the front banner. Not tucked in a corner, not reduced to inspiration. Just mine. As it should have always been. Voiceover. Maybe I won't erase her name. I'll just build mine until it echoes louder. I didn't need to hear, "I'm sorry," but hearing it reminded me I was never the problem. By the time the doors opened, the gallery was already humming with soft conversation and shuffling footsteps. Not rushed, not performative, just present. The title on the wall read, "The Unnamed." There were no labels, no biographies, no forced context. Just art. Raw, textural, mounted low enough for fingertips to touch when invited. Alongside each piece, fragments of unsent letters were stitched into the fabric or printed into margins. Half-truths, unfinished sentences, some painful, some defiant. No spotlight, no music, just air, wood floors, and people walking slowly. This was Portland, the same city where it all started, where I used to draw in silence because I thought that's all I had. Now the silence had shape, and people stood inside it. In the back corner, under softer lighting, stood a version of Sensory Shell. Not the glamorized one from the show. This one was as I'd originally imagined it, wrinkled, rough-edged, imperfect in all the ways it needed to be. Hung next to it on the wall was a quote, projected in white text. "This isn't fashion. This is memory stitched into form." People paused there longer than anywhere else. Another wall had side-by-side frames. One held a Vogue interview, the other a transcript from the behind-the-scenes footage that never aired. I didn't highlight anything. I didn't comment. I didn't explain. I let the contradictions speak, and at the center of the room, where most curators would have hung a signature piece, I left a blank canvas. Next to it stood a small sign. "This is for what they couldn't take." I didn't move through the space like it belonged to me. I moved like I had built it, and then stepped aside. The guests weren't loud, but they weren't silent either. Some whispered, some pointed gently. A few cried quietly, not from sadness, but from recognition. Isolde didn't come. I hadn't invited her. But near the entrance, nestled into the corner of a bench, I saw a small bouquet of white tulips. No card, no note. I didn't touch it, didn't interpret it. I just let it be. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, walked up to me later in the evening, wide-eyed and serious. "Did you make all this?" she asked. I knelt slightly to her height. "Some of it," I said. "Some of it made me." She nodded once, thoughtfully, and ran back to her group. Among them was Elka, standing near the snacks, laughing with someone over something unrelated to any of this. Our eyes met. I gave her a small nod. She returned it without needing words. That was enough. Later that night, I left the gallery alone. Portland's drizzle hadn't let up all day. The kind that didn't soak you, just reminded you it was there. I pulled my scarf tighter around my neck and walked down the sidewalk without umbrella or rush. I passed a cafe I used to sit in years ago, when things felt too big, and I needed the noise of strangers to quiet the noise inside my head. It was still there, still warm lit, still open. I didn't go in. Instead, I stopped outside the gallery again, turned around, and took a single photo. Not for a post, not for a headline, just for me, a bookmark, a closing page. They used my difference to decorate themselves, I whispered. I used it to build something that didn't need applause. I looked back through the glass one last time. Not unnamed anymore, just mine. Some stories end loud. Mine ended honest. Hi, I'm Danica. My sister dropped her 3 kids at my door, said she was off to find herself in Bali, and vanished without looking back. At first it was 2 weeks, then 2 months. Then, silence. I took care of her children. I packed lunches, held hands through nightmares, signed school papers I wasn't even legally allowed to touch. And just when I thought I'd adjusted to being invisible, a letter surfaced. A hidden will from our father. Turns out, the vanishing act? It wasn't the beginning. The betrayal had started long before the airport. So how do you raise someone else's children while their mother's building a new life without them? And what happens when she wants them back? Not out of love, but out of convenience. Would you let her? Or would you finally fight? End hook. It started like any other quiet Tuesday. Rain tapped against the kitchen window in soft, indecisive bursts. I'd just poured my second cup of coffee, letting it grow lukewarm beside the laptop while reviewing numbers for a client's retirement plan. Eugene's spring chill always made my bones ache a little more than I liked to admit. The house was still predictable, safe. Then came the knock. 3 quick raps on the front door. Not tentative, not urgent, just decisive. My stomach turned before I even reached the hallway. Celine never knocked like that, unless she wanted something. I opened the door, and there she was, my sister, standing like she'd just walked out of a travel blog. Sunglasses on her head, blowout hair too perfect for Oregon weather, scarf casually looped like it was Paris, not Pacific Northwest drizzle. Behind her stood 3 kids. Tobin, 10, jaw clenched like he was trying not to cry or scream. Maël, 7, hiding behind a sketchbook. And little Kale, barely 4, gripping a threadbare dinosaur like it was a lifeline. Danica? Celine breathed like she'd been running, though she absolutely hadn't. You look great. Listen, I need the tiniest favor. I didn't even get a word in before she nudged past me, ushering the children inside. It's just 2 weeks, she said, breezing through the living room. I got this opportunity, Bali, wellness retreat, influencers, potential sponsorships. It's big. Tobin didn't move from the doorway. He just stared at me. Maël's lip quivered. Kale leaned into my knee. Wait. What? I managed. She dropped a wrinkled envelope on the counter. Schedules, allergies, soccer practice. You work from home. It's perfect, right? I blinked. Celine, You're so good with them. And let's be honest, you've got the space. You're always saying it's quiet here since Dad passed. This'll be good. You need the energy. I didn't say it, but I thought it. I needed grief counseling, not an unannounced child drop-off. Mom said it's a good idea, she added. Of course she did. Celine, I can't just... You'll be fine, really. I'll call when I land. Kiss, kiss. She bent to hug the kids quickly. They didn't hug back. Then she was gone. I stood there, the door still open, rain curling in around the frame, 3 children blinking at me like I'd summoned them. Tobin finally spoke. She's not coming back in 2 weeks. I didn't argue. Instead, I took a deep breath and said, let's get you all settled. The rest of that day was a blur. The kids sat on the couch, silent, as I awkwardly tried to figure out what snacks they liked, where their clothes were, why none of them had jackets despite the weather. The schedule Celine left was a joke, scrawled in pen on a napkin. Tobin had soccer Thurs, maybe? Mael was nuts bad. I assumed that meant nut allergy. Kale needs blankie was the only reliable info. Dinner was frozen pizza. Not because I couldn't cook, but because I didn't know if they'd eat anything else. Mael picked the pepperoni off one by one. Kale didn't eat at all. Tobin chewed robotically. By 8, the house had fallen into a thick, heavy silence. I found pajamas for them, made guesses about bedtime routines, and quietly prayed I didn't mess up anything important. They didn't protest much, just complied. When I tucked Kale into the guest bedroom, he clutched my wrist. "Don't turn off the light," he whispered. "I won't," I promised. I sat beside him until his breathing slowed. Later, I made a cup of tea I never drank. I stood in the kitchen, watching the porch light flicker. My phone didn't ring. No text, no voicemail, not even an Instagram post. I thought about Celine in some airport lounge, sipping champagne, feeling unburdened. I thought about the years she spent chasing fulfillment in one form or another, relationships, jobs, detoxes. And I thought about the kids sleeping down the hall, left behind like an afterthought. At midnight, I curled up on the couch with a blanket I didn't need. I stared at the ceiling. The quiet wasn't comforting anymore. It was weighted, like grief with a new name. This wasn't the life I planned, but maybe it was the one I was chosen for. By the next morning, I'd already forgotten what sleep felt like. The kind where you drift off and trust the world will still be whole when you wake. Instead, I was jolted awake by a cough, wet, persistent, from the room across the hall. I pulled on the cardigan still draped over the foot of my bed and padded into Kale's room. But it wasn't him. It was Max, little body curled up on top of the comforter, his cheeks flushed with fever and a sheen of sweat on his forehead. I touched his skin lightly, too warm. I'd seen enough of these nights, sitting with my dad when his lungs had started to fail, to know what a 102-degree fever looked like even before the thermometer beeped confirmation. I settled beside him on the bed, propping him up gently. "You okay, buddy?" He nodded, barely. I got a wet washcloth and dabbed his forehead, holding his small hand in mine. Then came the whisper, so soft I almost missed it. "Does Mom know I'm sick?" That question, so innocent, so simple. But it knocked something loose inside me. I could have said yes. I could have told him she was busy or that she would call later. But my mouth refused to lie, not that night. I ran my fingers through his damp hair. "She doesn't yet," I murmured. "But I'll make sure she does." Max's eyes fluttered closed before he could respond. I stayed there, listening to the shallow rhythm of his breath until he drifted off. Downstairs, I brewed peppermint tea. Not for me, I wasn't going to sleep, but it gave my hands something to do while I composed the message in my head. Clear. Not emotional. Straightforward. Max has a high fever. Took him to urgent care. They said it's viral, but keep him hydrated and watch for breathing issues. He asked if you knew. Let me know if you want to call him. I stared at the blinking cursor in the text box for a few seconds before hitting send. Then I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Eventually, I walked over to the couch and sank into it, tea untouched. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old floorboards. An hour later, I opened Instagram. Don't ask me why. I hadn't even followed Celine in years. But I typed her handle, found her easily, and there she was, framed by gauzy curtains and tropical light, reclined on a balcony in a silk robe, wineglass in hand. "Finally learning to live again," the caption read, with 3 butterfly emojis. She'd posted it 11 minutes after I texted. I stared at the screen, numb. Then I took a screenshot. That was the beginning. I didn't know why I saved it. I wasn't building a case, not really. It just felt wrong to let that moment disappear into the feed. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it Celine Receipts. I dropped the screenshot in. That night, I slept in a chair beside Max's bed. The next morning, the kids had cereal. Mael wanted toast, but the bread was too stale, so we made pancakes instead, burnt edges and all. Tobin didn't say much. He kept looking at the front door like he expected it to swing open with Celine standing there, arms outstretched like a character in one of those feel-good holiday movies. she didn't. Later that week, when I picked up Maëlle from school, I overheard her talking to another little girl at the edge of the playground. "We're living with Aunt Danica now," she said. "Mommy's finding herself in Bali." The other girl blinked, unsure what to say. A teacher glanced at me. It wasn't judgment, it was sympathy. I don't know why, but that look hit harder than anything else that day. Pity settled in my chest like something sour. I waved to Maëlle and smiled, a real one, because she didn't need to know any of that. Not yet. That evening, after dinner and baths and the third round of coaxing Kale into pajamas, we sat on the rug and read from a picture book that had definitely seen better days. Max curled into my side. Maëlle rested her head against my shoulder, and Tobin pretended not to listen from the armchair, but I caught him peeking over the edge. As I tucked Max in, he blinked at me sleepily. "Will Mommy call tomorrow?" I swallowed. "Maybe," I said softly. But as I turned off his lamp and pulled the door halfway closed, I whispered to myself in the hallway, almost like a promise no one else needed to hear. If she doesn't, I will. The next week moved both too fast and far too slow. In between pediatric follow-ups, spilled milk, and late-night story times, I was adjusting to a life I hadn't agreed to, but somehow couldn't imagine abandoning. On a Thursday morning, Maëlle's school called. Her class was planning a short trip to a local wildlife center, and they needed a guardian's signature on the field trip release form. I told the secretary I'd be by in an hour. It was routine, a small thing, until it wasn't. When I arrived, the woman behind the desk smiled politely but hesitated when I reached for the clipboard. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "We'll need the legal guardian to sign here." I blinked. "I'm their guardian. I'm taking care of them." She glanced at the file. "There's nothing on record. Technically, the school still has their mother listed. We just need something official." It wasn't her fault. She was doing her job. Still, I felt heat crawl up my neck. I could feel the eyes of other parents behind me in the office waiting area. I stepped aside, nodded, and mumbled, "I'll get what you need." Back in the car, I sat with the form in my lap, staring at the blank signature line. I wasn't angry at the school. I was angry at Celine. For leaving, for assuming, for never thinking through anything beyond the surface of her life. That night, just as I finished cleaning the kitchen, a knock came at the door. No one uses the front door here, not unless it's Amazon or someone selling solar panels. I opened it and saw the envelope on the mat. Thick, expensive-looking, with my name printed in calligraphy. No return address, but I didn't need one. Inside was a notarized guardianship letter. Glossy, clean, full of buzzwords. Temporary custodial delegation. Parental discretion. Emergency medical consent. At first, I felt relief. Maybe she was trying. Maybe Celine finally understood I needed authority to do this right. But then I saw the clause. Paragraph 4, hidden in legal padding, tiny font near the bottom. The delegated party shall not file for full custody, nor contest parental rights, nor pursue permanent guardianship of any minor listed herein. I read it twice. Then again. Then out loud. It wasn't a gesture of responsibility, it was a muzzle. She was locking me in as a babysitter, long-term, unpaid, legally powerless. And if something happened, if she never came back, I'd be holding the weight without the rights, raising her kids without ever being allowed to claim them, protect them, fight for them. I folded the paper carefully, put it back in the envelope, and placed it on the kitchen counter. Then I called Mireille. Mireille Ashcroft had been my father's lawyer for over a decade. She'd helped with his estate, walked me through the grief-laced bureaucracy after his death. She was sharp, dry, and didn't suffer fools. When I explained what had happened, she didn't even ask me to send the document electronically. She told me to bring it in, and fast. The next day, I sat across from her in her wood-paneled office, the scent of leather and paper oddly comforting. She read the letter silently, her brows lifting slightly at the signature line. Cute, she said dryly. Then she read it again. When she reached the fourth paragraph, she set the paper down and removed her glasses.
She's trying to bind you to a role without recourse. You'd have all the obligation, none of the authority, and zero protection if this goes south. I already knew that, but hearing it aloud made it feel more real. Can I refuse? I asked. Absolutely. Do not sign anything, and if she pressures you, forward every message to me. In the meantime, we need to start building a timeline. Everything she's said, done, posted. You've already kept records? I nodded. Good. Don't delete anything. Keep a log of all your expenses, medical visits, school interactions. This isn't revenge, I said quietly. I'm not trying to punish her. Mireille leaned forward, her voice low. Of course not. This is about protection. For them. For you. I drove home with my hands gripping the wheel tighter than necessary. That evening, after homework and grilled cheese sandwiches, after bedtime and brushing teeth, and one more story, because Kale always asked, after all that, I took Celine's letter and placed it in the fireproof safe next to my father's will. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote, Day 42. Max had a fever. I took him to urgent care. Celine did not respond. Then I opened my laptop and renamed the folder. Guardianship Timeline, Brie Allen. Later, I called the kids to dinner. My voice didn't crack this time. I didn't feel the weight in my chest when Tobin pushed his food around or when Maëlle asked if she could wear my old sweatshirt to sleep because it felt safe. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the kitchen window. It was raining again. Eugene always gets rain this time of year, and I used to hate it. Now it felt like the world crying with me, quietly, without drama. As the night settled in, I thought about every time Celine had handed off her responsibilities, every excuse masked in therapy speak. Healing, processing, self-prioritization. She'd abandoned her children for a hashtag, and I wasn't going to let that go unanswered. If she won't protect them, I will. No clause, no signature, no sister will stop me. The morning after I locked that letter in the safe, I found myself back in Mireille's office. It wasn't part of my plan. I hadn't planned on anything, really. But I needed to see her eyes when I told her I wasn't backing down. She didn't make me wait. Mireille waved me in like she'd been expecting the call. You brought the letter? I nodded and handed her the sealed will. The second one. My father had left it behind the filing cabinet in his old study, tucked behind a folder labeled Tax Deductions. I wouldn't have found it if I hadn't been searching for a stapler. She opened the envelope with the care of someone who knew documents could shatter lives. As she read, her eyebrows inched upward. Then she set it down and looked at me, not with surprise, but something softer, a quiet kind of pride. Your father was thorough, she said. What does it mean? She pointed to the final paragraph. In the event that Celine Varelli voluntarily ceases custodial care of her children for more than 60 consecutive days, full guardianship shall transfer to Danica Brialin Varelli, along with primary residence and access to educational and medical decisions. It's airtight. I sat back in the leather chair, breathing in the weight of it. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but because someone had seen me, planned for me, trusted me. Mireille handed me the signed original and a set of photocopies. Put the original back in the safe. Keep one copy in your bag. And Danica, don't tell Celine you have it. Not yet. Why not? She'll find a way to twist it. Let her act first. Let her mess up. I nodded, gripping the papers like they were a lifeline. That afternoon, I picked Maëlle up from school a little early. The sky had that hazy Oregon glow. Sunlight filtered through cloud cover, making everything feel softer than it really was. She skipped toward me, backpack bouncing, a thick paper in her hand. Look what I made, she chirped, holding up a colorful Mother's Day card. On the front, crayon flowers and glitter surrounded the words, Happy Mother's Day to the one who tucks me in. Inside, 4 stick figures smiled up at me. One was unmistakably me, brown hair in a bun, glasses. Next to me, 3 smaller figures, Maëlle with her sketchbook, Tobin with a soccer ball, Kale with his dinosaur. There was no Celine. I didn't point it out. I just knelt down and hugged her tight. She whispered, I didn't know if I was allowed to give it to you. My throat closed. You can always give me anything, sweetie, I said, brushing her hair behind her ear. At dinner, Tobin was quieter than usual. After I tucked Kale and Mael into bed, he lingered at the hallway. He cleared his throat. Mom would have thrown that card away. I looked at him. What? She doesn't like it when we draw people who aren't her. Mael was scared you'd be mad. I'm not, I said. He gave a small nod, then added, It's a good card. When he turned to go to his room, I stopped him and pulled him into a hug. For once, he didn't tense up. He leaned in, just enough for me to feel it. I didn't need him to say the words. That moment was enough. Later that night, with the kids asleep, I stood in the kitchen again. The copy of the will lay on the table next to my untouched tea. Mael's card rested beside it, open like a window. Behind me, I heard humming, soft and sweet, her bedtime melody, drifting from her room. I stared at the two papers in front of me, one written in legal ink, the other in crayon and glitter. Both said the same thing. I was the one who stayed. I wasn't Celine. I didn't float in and out of their lives with excuses wrapped in hashtags. I didn't smile for cameras and disappear when things got inconvenient. I showed up, I packed lunches, I kissed foreheads, I went to urgent care at midnight and signed permission slips even when I wasn't allowed. Celine could write all the narratives she wanted, but she wasn't here. And a will tucked behind tax folders and a card made with Elmer's glue said more than 1,000 of her captions ever would. I read my father's handwriting again. You were always the one who stayed, the one who showed up. He knew. Even when I didn't believe in myself, he had. I folded the will carefully, placed it back in the file, and locked it in the safe. Then I stood in the kitchen, lights low, the air humming with that steady quiet only a home at peace can offer. And I said it, not to anyone in particular, but loud enough for the universe to hear. I will not be erased. It had been 12 days since I held my father's will in my hands, and I hadn't heard a word from Celine. No video calls, no emails, not even a lazy selfie captioned with something like, "Grateful for the little things." The kids had stopped asking when she'd reach out. Even Kale, who used to fall asleep clutching a framed photo of her, had quietly replaced it with his dinosaur. On a warm Wednesday, Mael's art teacher emailed to invite me to her classroom showcase. I RSVP'd yes without hesitation. She'd been working on a series of pieces about home. I was curious, nervous maybe, but proud. We walked into the elementary school together, Mael skipping beside me, holding my hand. I dressed simply, clean jeans, a soft blue blouse, hair pulled back, comfortable, confident. The moment we stepped into the hallway outside her classroom, my heart stopped. Celine was there. She stood in heels too tall for this setting, wrapped in a red silk jumpsuit, lips painted a shade too bold for the hour. A cameraman, yes, a literal cameraman, trailed beside her, holding up a phone stabilized on a gimbal. "Oh my God, look at these walls!" she announced to no one in particular, her voice loud, sugar-coated. "So precious. Just so much heart in every line these little ones draw." She didn't see us yet. I stood frozen, Mael's hand suddenly tight in mine. Then Celine turned, and the moment she spotted me, she lit up like she'd just discovered paparazzi outside a gala. "Danica, you came too," she beamed, striding over as the camera swung to follow her. "Everyone, meet my incredible sister. She's been helping while I, did the healing work." I said nothing. Behind me, Mael shifted closer to my leg. "Mael, baby, show mommy your art," Celine cooed. "I can't wait to see all the magic you've been creating." The teacher stepped forward, offering a careful smile, the kind reserved for school events teetering on the edge of chaos. "Mael's been very focused," she said gently. We walked into the classroom. The walls were covered in drawings, houses, families, trees with roots. I spotted Mael's immediately. It was a picture of 4 stick figures, Mael, Kale, Tobin, and me. No red jumpsuit, No long hair, just four people holding hands in front of a little brown house with a swing set. Celine laughed too brightly. "Oh, where's Mommy in this one?" she said, pointing. "Did you forget me?" Maëlle looked down at her shoes. Tobin, who had appeared silently beside us, mumbled, "She didn't forget." My body tensed. Celine's camera swept the room again. "Just catching sweet memories," she said, then turned the camera on me. "And here's the real MVP, Danica. She's done." "Okay, right, kids." I saw red. I clenched my fists, careful not to show it. The teacher's eyes met mine with an apology that didn't need words. I bent down to Maëlle's level. "Let's get your folder and head out early, sweetheart." We walked out before Celine could protest. The camera didn't follow us. Back home, I made grilled cheese sandwiches while the kids played in the yard. Kale was pretending the garden hose was a fire truck. Tobin sat on the steps with his earbuds in. Maëlle sat at the kitchen table, coloring silently. That night, after they were asleep, the house quiet again. My phone rang. It was Mom. I shouldn't have picked up, but I did. "I heard there was a scene at the school," she said, not even saying hello. "Did you have to storm out?" "She's their mother, Danica." I took a breath, stayed calm. "She brought a film crew." Maëlle was humiliated. It wasn't about the kids, it was about her. "She's trying," Mom said, her voice tight. "You don't know what it's like to be under that kind of pressure." Celine was always the one everyone looked up to. She's doing the best she can. I almost laughed. Her best includes setting up a live stream in a second-grade classroom? You've never had kids of your own. Maybe this is your way of contributing. You're stable. It makes sense. It hit me like a slap. I pressed my palm into my chest, steadying my breath. Is that what I am to you? A fallback plan? The one who picks up the pieces when Celine needs to reset her narrative? She's struggling, Danica. She's always struggling. And I'm done bleeding for it. I hung up. No goodbye. I sat at the kitchen table for a while. Then I pulled out my journal, the same one I started the day after Celine left. I wrote one sentence. This is the last time anyone speaks to me like I'm furniture. Then I opened the safe, took out the will, reread Maëlle's card from the fridge door, ran my fingers over the glitter and glue. This wasn't about revenge. It was about claiming what was already mine, what had already been entrusted to me by the only man who ever saw me clearly, my father. And now, by the three kids who were no longer guests in my house, but anchors in my life. I closed the will, placed it back, locked the safe. Then I opened my email. Subject line, legal boundaries. Celine, I am documenting this for the record. If you appear at their school again unannounced, or bring a recording crew into an educational environment, I will file a formal complaint with both the school district and the family court. This is no longer personal. It is legal. Danica, I hit send. Then I turned off the light, walked past the kids' rooms one by one, checked their doors, and stood in the hallway for a long moment. She keeps poking, she's going to find out. I'm not made of glass. The email had barely left my outbox when my phone vibrated again. This time, it wasn't Celine or the school. It was Mireille. You need to come in, she said. I found something you need to see with your own eyes. I dropped the dish towel on the counter and told Tobin to keep an eye on the mac and cheese bubbling on the stove. He nodded without question. Lately, they'd all learned to read my mood better than most adults ever had. 15 minutes later, I sat across from Mireille at her office table. She didn't offer coffee, didn't waste time. I was reviewing court document logs and stumbled across this. She slid a printed form across the desk toward me. At first, I didn't register what I was looking at. The lines and checkboxes blurred together until one word snapped into focus, visa. What is this? I asked, my voice low. Celine's petition to begin the process for international relocation, Bali, with all 3 children listed as dependents, filed 2 weeks ago. My hands gripped the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles paled. There's no mention of you, she continued. She claimed full guardianship, submitted an address, wrote she was reuniting with her children after temporary care by a family member. I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew she was careless, but this? This was orchestrated. She's planning to take them, I whispered. She's trying to, Mireille said, voice clipped. But she's sloppy. She underestimated both the paper trail and your resolve. The next hours blurred into paperwork and controlled fury. I called the kid's pediatrician to confirm medical files under my name. I pulled school email records, field trip authorizations, the receipt from urgent care with Max's fever date. I sent it all to Mireille. We drafted an emergency petition to block travel, citing abandonment, misrepresentation, and falsified documents. I included screenshots, dates, social posts, all the crumbs Celine left while she spun her healing journey story. Driving home, I kept replaying one thought. She didn't forget me. She erased me. And she was hoping no one would notice. The sun was just beginning to dip below the pines when I pulled into the driveway. Maëlle and Kale were drawing chalk rainbows on the sidewalk. Tobin sat on the porch step, earbuds in, watching the driveway like he'd expected something to go wrong. I walked up slowly, my mind still caught between legal codes and betrayal. Inside, I made dinner without speaking much, spaghetti with jarred sauce and garlic bread from the freezer. Comfort food, or at least a poor imitation of it. The kids didn't ask why I was quiet. They ate with the strange politeness that comes only from sensing the grown-ups are carrying too much. After dinner, Maëlle pulled something from her backpack. My art project, she said, handing me a laminated paper. It was a family tree. The top said, My Home, in purple marker. My name was in the center trunk. Branches reached out to Tobin, Kale, and her. Celine's name wasn't anywhere. I didn't react. Just nodded and kissed her on the head. She wandered off, humming, content. Later that night, once they were in bed, I sat them down one by one for a conversation. Not an announcement, not a panic, just truth. I started with Maëlle. Sweetheart, I said softly, have you heard anything from your mom? She shook her head. She posted a video last week, she said, but it was just her in the ocean. What would you think if she wanted you to live with her again? Somewhere far. Maëlle blinked slowly, then wrinkled her nose. I like it here, she said. She never cooks. Next, I sat with Tobin. He looked up before I even spoke. She's not taking us. I'm doing everything I can to make sure of that, I said. You don't have to. We're not going. His words didn't come with drama. No fists clenched. No raised voice, just certainty. Finally, Kale, too young to understand, too sensitive to pretend. Kale, if Mommy wanted to take you to live in another country, would you go? He stared at me, then ran into my lap and held on tight. That was answer enough. I tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and promised silently, again, that they were safe. Downstairs, I stood in the kitchen with the counter lights low and Mireille's documents spread across the surface. I signed everything. Slowly. Clearly. The pen didn't shake this time. I put them back in the envelope and sealed it. In the silence of my home, I spoke aloud, though no one was there to hear it. If she wants a fight, I'm no longer afraid to win it. I signed my name with a hand steadier than it had been in months. No hesitation. No tremor. The documents sat in front of me on Mireille's desk. My name beneath every declaration, affidavit, and motion. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a line drawn in permanent ink. Mireille collected the forms, stacked them neatly, and slid them into a manila folder. We file tomorrow morning. I nodded, already reaching for my purse. The kids would be getting out of school soon, and I had a feeling they'd need more than just snacks when they walked through the door. I didn't know yet what Celine's next move would be, but I'd learned enough by now to expect spectacle. That expectation proved right within 24 hours. The next morning, I waited in the courthouse hallway while the children were brought in separately for their scheduled interviews with the judge, private sessions, as requested, to protect them from undue influence. I sat stiffly on a bench outside the family courtroom, my hands folded so tightly in my lap they turned red. I wasn't allowed inside while the judge spoke to them. but I didn't need to be. When the door opened again, Tobin was the first to step out. He didn't say anything. He just walked over and hugged me. Hard. Maëlle followed next. She smiled faintly, then whispered as she passed, "We told her the truth." I swallowed the knot rising in my throat and nodded. Later, back in open court, the judge read excerpts from the transcripts. "She's Mom," Tobin had said, "not the one who left, the one who stayed." Maëlle had drawn a picture of our family. The judge held it up. Celine's name was nowhere to be found. Across the room, Celine sat perfectly still, her lips curled into that same tight smile she always used when she felt cornered. "I've been going through a transformation," she said when it was her turn. "I needed space to grow as a woman, as a mother. That doesn't mean I abandoned them. I knew they were safe with my sister." "You didn't call," the judge replied. "You didn't write. You made no medical appointments. You filed for international visas without notice. Can you explain that?" Celine's smile faltered. "That was just preparation," she said. "Exploring options." Options. That night, as if to spin the public opinion in her favor, Celine went live on Instagram. The lighting was dramatic. Candles, a glass of wine, soft jazz in the background. She looked into the camera with tear-bright eyes. "I never imagined my own family would turn on me like this," she began. "I sacrificed so much for my kids. And now my sister, someone I trusted, is trying to steal them from me. She's using the courts, using old trauma against me. This isn't about the children. This is about control." The comments started supportive. Her loyal followers dropped heart emojis, sent prayers, called me jealous, cold, bitter. Then the tide turned. "You left them for 6 months. You posted daily from Bali. You blocked their school. She took them to the ER. You didn't even call." The screen started filling with screenshots. TikTok stitched together Celine's posts from the past half year. Reddit threads dissected her timelines, matched her spa selfies with court dates. Twitter turned brutal. By the next morning, #Danica deserves. Better was trending. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing joyful about this. I simply downloaded every relevant clip, comment, and time-stamped post. I sent it all to Mireille. We sat side by side in her office later that day, watching one particularly vicious live-stream breakdown from Celine. In it, she accused the school of bias, the court of corruption, and me of being a bitter spinster desperate to raise kids she couldn't have. Mireille didn't even blink. "This works in our favor," she said calmly. "She's unraveling." She handed me another folder, thicker this time. "Here's the fraud case." I stared down at it. "She signed your name on a property transfer. She filed for travel documents without consent. That's forgery and custodial interference." My fingers brushed the edge of the folder. "And the school board?" "I've already filed a statement on your behalf." It was happening, not just the custody battle, but the exposure of everything she'd tried to cover in silk and hashtags. I took the pen again. This time, I didn't think of the consequences. I thought of Maëlle's drawings, of Kale curling into my lap during thunderstorms, of Tobin pulling me aside to show me his science test, the one he aced. I signed. It's time the court hears what she tried to erase. I stepped out onto the porch just as the sun dipped below the pine line, casting the yard in gold and shadow. The day had been long, dense with signatures and strategy, but now the house was quiet. The kids were watching a movie in the den, popcorn bowls beside them, giggles seeping under the door like soft relief. I hadn't told them everything yet, just enough to keep their world steady. Inside, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Unknown number. I let it ring, assuming it was another troll who found my number through one of Celine's live streams. But then the voicemail alert blinked, and curiosity got the better of me. I pressed play. "Danica, it's Terry Lawson. I represent Mrs. Celine Varelli. We'd like to discuss settlement options before the next hearing." I stared at the screen, then deleted the message. She could talk to my lawyer now. I had nothing left to say. The next morning, I met Morelli at the courthouse, both of us early enough to watch the fog roll off the building's wide brick steps. We didn't exchange pleasantries. There wasn't anything left unsaid between us. Inside, She slid another manila folder across the table in the small consultation room. "You might want to sit down for this one," she said, though I was already seated. The top sheet was a notarized form. Power of attorney, real estate transaction. My name was printed neatly on the third line, just below a forged signature in my own handwriting. The seller, Celine Varelli. The witness, Florence. I let out a laugh, sharp, humorless. "She forged my name." "Yes. And your mother signed off as a witness. The intent was to transfer the title of your father's house to Celine alone, which she then intended to sell, cash out the equity for what she called a long-term healing investment overseas." "A Bali retreat," I muttered. Morale didn't react. She just waited for my decision. "What now?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "We file." Fraud. Forgery. Attempted child relocation without consent. And for good measure, filing a false legal instrument. I nodded once, stood, and followed her into the clerk's office. It was surgical. Deliberate. Cold. That night, after we filed the motion and returned home, my phone rang again. This time with a familiar number. It was Mom. I hesitated, picked up. Her voice came through ragged, almost unsure. "I didn't know," she began. "I thought it was temporary." She said it was just to keep the house in the family. "You signed a document that gave her power to sell the only home Dad left us," I said. "She said you agreed, that you weren't interested in keeping it." I didn't answer. I let silence hold the truth between us. "You signed my name, Mom. That's not temporary. That's erasure." She didn't reply. The call ended without a goodbye. 2 days later, the kids' school year ended. I pulled into the parking lot, heart tight with a different kind of emotion. Tobin was the first to spot me, sprinting from the school doors and dropping his backpack halfway across the lawn. Mael followed close behind, waving a construction paper folder in the air. Kale held hands with his kindergarten teacher, his cheeks flushed from popsicle stains. They ran to me, not because I called, not because it was expected, but because they wanted to. Behind them, the teachers waved. One mouthed, "You did great." Another patted me on the shoulder and handed over Kale's crayon-covered progress report. When the secretary brought me the final paperwork, I signed, this time legally, my name, in ink, with rights. I folded the papers slowly, not rushing the moment. Then we went home. That evening, we celebrated on the porch with grilled hot dogs, fizzy lemonade, and the kind of music you can sing loud without worrying about the neighbors. Tobin taught Kale how to kick a soccer ball across the yard. Mael drew chalk flowers on the driveway. I sat on the porch swing, listening, watching, just breathing. Right before bedtime, another call came. Murray answered it. I heard only her end. Yes, she received the message. "No, we're not negotiating outside the system. Then please submit your offer in writing. We'll respond through the court." She hung up and looked at me. "They're testing to see if you'll flinch." "I won't." We watched the sun set from the porch. For once, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the next shoe to drop. It already had. Now, it was just cleanup. That night, I tucked the kids in with the kind of peace that comes after a storm. Not because everything was over, but because I finally understood that I wasn't just holding the line. I was the line. The envelope was thinner than I'd expected. No gold seal, no thick legal paper, just a plain white rectangle with the court stamp in the top left corner. It had been sitting in the mailbox for 2 hours before I picked it up, though I'd passed by it at least 4 times, taking out the trash, checking the front door, watering the tomatoes. Inside, 1 page. Ruling. Permanent custody of Tobin, Mael, and Kale Varelli is granted to Danica Brialin Varelli. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just sat on the edge of the porch and folded the letter slowly, like a flag after a long war. I placed it in the drawer beside my father's will and Mael's crayon card, the drawer that held the weight of every decision I'd made since the day Celine left. That Friday, the high school gym buzzed with the kind of excitement only graduation could bring. Paper streamers lined the walls, Rows of fold-out chairs filled quickly with parents clutching flowers, phones, and tears. Tobin stood with his class at the far end, cap slightly crooked, his gown a bit too long for his frame. He caught my eye and offered the smallest of grins. Maëlle waved like she was the one graduating. Kale sat on my lap, fidgeting with the ribbon on the bouquet we'd brought. Then I saw her. Celine arrived through the side door, wearing white silk and oversized sunglasses, as if the gym's fluorescent lights were paparazzi bulbs. A man trailed behind her, young, polished, clearly holding a camera. She strutted past the rows until she reached the edge of the reserved seating. A staff member gently stepped forward. "Excuse me, ma'am. Only legal guardians are permitted on stage today." "I'm his mother," she said, voice loud enough to turn heads. "I understand," the staffer replied, calm but firm. "Our records indicate Danica Brialin Varelli is the legal guardian. I'm happy to find you a seat near the front." Celine froze for a second, just long enough for the whispering to start, then followed the staffer, her smile too wide to be real. When Tobin's name was called, I stood. Maëlle and Kale each held one of my hands. The three of us walked with him down the aisle. Flashbulbs went off, and for a moment, the crowd blurred. On stage, the principal handed Tobin his diploma and then turned to me. "We'd like to honor someone today," he said, voice carrying through the microphone. "A parent who has shown extraordinary dedication, consistency, and love." He held up a framed certificate. I recognized the gold edge, the seal. My name was written in large script across the center. Parent Recognition Award, Danica Varelli. The applause was polite, but sincere. I didn't turn to see if Celine clapped. Back home, the celebration was quieter. We grilled burgers in the backyard. Maëlle played music from her tablet, Kale blew bubbles until his cheeks hurt, and Tobin actually laughed. Not the guarded smirk I was used to, but the real thing. Unfiltered. Free. I sat alone for a few minutes while the kids played tag, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand. The breeze moved through the yard like a familiar guest. I reached into the basket beside the swing and pulled out my father's letter. "You were always the one who stayed," it said. I read it aloud. Not for the first time. Probably not the last. A card arrived in Monday's mail. The envelope was floral, the handwriting unmistakable. Inside, a single sentence from Florence. "You did what you had to do." No apology, no explanation. But for the first time, I didn't need either. I placed the card in the drawer with the others and closed it gently. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, I lit a single candle on the mantel. In front of it stood a new frame, one I'd bought the week prior, but hadn't dared to fill until now. The photo was simple. The four of us sitting on the porch, Maëlle's head resting on my shoulder, Tobin mid-laugh, Kale holding his dinosaur plush between us. Sunlight kissed the corners of the image, like it had been waiting to bless that exact moment. Beneath the frame was a brass plaque, the ones who stayed. I didn't need a courtroom anymore, or social media to prove what we were. I didn't even need Celine's acknowledgement. Her absence had already answered everything. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to protect us are the first to disappear, and the ones who step up aren't bound by blood, but by love, sacrifice, and presence. This story isn't just about custody or legal battles, it's about choosing to show up when others walk away. What would you have done in Danica's shoes? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life revenge stories that reveal the truths behind closed doors. E gave birth to them, but I raised them. That's what family means now.